Everybody's talking about the a7 IV, the successor to Sony's probably best-selling mirrorless camera ever, the a7 III. In this video, I'm going to discuss why. So, I wasn't well when I shot this. I have a 14-minute video about the a7 IV in regards to how it stacks up with a user who uses an a7S III and an a7R IV. I still want to talk about it, and maybe we'll come back to some of that. But that's not good. That's really not good. We're gonna see how this goes. So, I'm taking a break at work right now. It's like 50 degrees in Michigan, which is crazy because it was like 20 yesterday. So I have the 200 to 600 out because I just got it and I haven't been able to play with it anyway. This is an a7 IV conversation though. Hopefully the wind isn't too bad. It's a little windy out here. a7 IV as an a7R IV, a7S III user. I'm shooting on my a7S III right now. There are two major things that made it difficult for me to go to the a7 IV. And I had a pre-order out. I had pre-ordered the a7 IV. My boss pre-ordered it for work. And I was really excited about it because I was like, okay, for work and for my work outside of my main job, for video, I basically rely on the a7S III. For photography, I absolutely love my a7R IV. What do they do that the a7 IV doesn't? So I had a pre-order, a personal pre-order for the a7 IV, and I had talked my boss into waiting for the a7 IV because we wanted to have a shop camera setup. Totally cool. I was pumped. I wanted to have one camera that can do enough video and enough photo that I could take it traveling, that I could do whatever. You know, using an a7S III and an a7R IV, they really are opposites of each other. I love the high megapixels for when I'm doing portraiture and doing like product photos and stuff, but it just is a mule to use for video, whereas the opposite is true for the a7S III, which has amazing video, and 12 megapixels is plenty, but if I'm doing like professional work where I want the megapixels, I often need and like the megapixels. So, you know, over 30 megapixels, oversampled 4K 24, an option for 4K 60, which I put a little asterisk at 4K 60 because there's people that go crazy about the crop. I'll come back to that. So I buy the 70-200 Mark II and cancel my pre-order for the a7 IV. Gonna have one at work. I don't really need it right now. It's the winter months. I do less traveling and such not. So I get the camera. I get it earlier than I thought I was gonna get. And then I get to work. I get using the camera. The files are great. The over 30 megapixels is awesome. It does product photo awesome. The autofocus is great. Everything's fine. The video, the oversampled 4K 24 looks great. And then I realize there's two things that, as someone who regularly uses the a7S III and the a7R IV, what I thought were small caveats, for me personally, were huge caveats. One, I was expecting the a7 IV's rolling shutter to be at least better than the a7R IV. If you've ever used an a7R IV for video, especially not in crop mode, there is no truly discernible difference to my eye between the a7R IV's rolling shutter and the a7 IV's. And it's fine, because I get it. That oversampling is a lot of data, and that pixel readout is not gonna be fast. But it's enough so that like every time I wanna do anything serious with video, I'm gonna grab the a7S III because I handhold a lot of work. It's a big deal. It's a bigger deal to me than I had expected. And it may not be a big deal to you because locked off shots, slow movements, things like that, it's absolutely killer. But for my workflow and the things that I like to do, I know that it would bug me. 2, I thought, and I still think, technically speaking, 30 plus megapixels is like heavenly. That's all you need. 30 is so much. 24 is perfect. I can get everything I need done with 24. In fact, for online, I love 12. I use my a7S III for Instagram content all the time. Absolutely love it. For my work, I love my 61 megapixels. I had no idea the crop mode being 24 megapixels in my a7R4 was such a big deal to me. You know, I just said I'm fine with 12, so why would I, you know, hiccup at a 15 megapixel crop like the a7IV? So why would I scoff at 15 megapixels on a crop? Because I own an a7R4. The feature set on the a7IV is remarkable. For $2,500, I am hard pressed to say there is a better mirrorless hybrid shooting camera. Hard stop. As someone who works professionally day to day, does side gigs, does content throughout the entire week, all the time, I'm not willing to give up 60 megapixels and the rolling shutter and 120, etc., all the benefits for the video on the a7S III over the a7 IV. So, as a user running those cameras, if the a7R4 had S-Cinetone, it'd be a no-brainer. I still use the a7 IV at work, at this job, as a B camera considerably. I use it as an A camera a lot when I don't need to have the features on the a7S III, and it's absolutely stellar. But S-Cinetone alone isn't enough for me to get a $2,500 camera when I have two remarkable cameras, and I was just getting a little gear greedy, I guess. It surprised me, but having been able to play with the a7 IV regularly, I would have been upset had I sold my a7R4 for an a7 IV. I had a buyer for my a7 IV lined up. I was gonna sell that. That was gonna pay off the a7 IV cleanly, which was pretty cool. And I was gonna be fine. But 61 megapixels, if you've gotten that into your workflow, it's really hard to go back. The TLDR of this whole thing is that new hot cameras really, you know, the gear gets me so excited. I love all of the feature sets that are improved on the a7 IV. It really did some great things. I think the breathing compensation is one of the most incredible features. And if it wasn't for that oversampling, I'm not sure they could have done it. Which is unfortunate because I'd love to see it on the a7S III as a firmware update or whatever, but I'm not sure they can do it without at least cropping or something. I don't know what they would have to do, but it's not super possible. You know, slight autofocus improvements, having S-Cinetone, the 4K 60. Now I want to talk about the 4K 60. In a $2,500 camera that has oversampled 4K 24, 4K 30, where you're getting incredible data rates with a big megapixel sensor. How are you going to be able to do all of that and get clean 4K 60 without burning the camera up? It's probably possible. There are probably ways. But the fact that they squeezed in the 4K 60 with a crop at all, one, I think it required it to even be a camera that's viable for a lot of folks in 2022. But it's everything you could possibly need if you're running 24 or 30p timelines. I personally don't like 60p timelines. I would much rather see a 24 or a 30. Yes, I'm fine with 30p. It's tough. I say all this to say the a7 IV, if you're maybe at an a7 III or an older camera, or even a crop sensor like a a6600, a6400, a6500, something like that, The a7 IV is going to be hard for companies to beat for a while. It's a fantastic camera, has just about everything you could need to at least get into professional workflows. I mean, you can get into professional workflows with an a6300, but to truly be, you know, doing it, the S-Log's great, S-Cinetone is a dream. It's a truly hybrid camera, and I'm really excited that they got there, because that just means the next editions of these cameras are going to be incredible. I just wanted to record some thoughts on this camera before I get into this podcast that I'm starting. Going to be starting a podcast with my buddy David. He's a photographer from northern Michigan. He has fantastic work. He does some weddings, and he does a lot of really great wildlife stuff, and kind of everything in between. He also makes coffee, which is the dream. Glad I met up with this guy, because his coffee is bomb. It's going to be called the Light Overtime Podcast, and our first full episode is going to be me and David talking about his transition to Sony. He was a Nikon shooter forever. He recently had an a7 III, which put his foot in the door. He sold a D850 and his whole kit to move over to Sony, and he bought an a7 IV, so he's running an a7 IV and a7 III. We're going to kind of dive into that. We're going to get into a little bit of the nitty-gritty of the topics I discussed here with the a7 IV, and we'll be talking about the creative process. I don't want to focus just on gear, but we're going to talk about working photographer stuff. We're going to talk about creating content. We're going to talk about being creative. We're going to talk about it all. We're going to talk a lot about coffee. It's going to be pretty good. So stay tuned for that. I'll have links to the channel, the Podbean channel, and the other social media for that. So if you're interested, please give that stuff a follow and check out our first podcast. I'll have an introductory podcast that goes up later this week. And yeah, thanks for walking around the woods with me and, you know, talking about the a7 IV. So that's going to be it today for the a7 IV. I do love this camera a lot. I really wish it was the camera that came out when I was switching to Sony from Panasonic and Canon, but I love my a7S III. I love the a7R IV. I still might eventually end up with one of these, but I'm glad I can use it at work for now. If you'd like to know anything else about it, if you'd like to see anything from any of these cameras, any of these lenses, please let me know. If you're curious about anything else, let's start a conversation in the comments. I'd love to talk to you. Be on the lookout for the Light Overtime Podcast. Some links are below, and thanks for hanging out with me today.